I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the Splendid Table from APM. So, I recently got to travel to Japan with my family, and it was an absolutely fantastic trip. And while it's a little bit of a cliche to talk about, it is just so true that so many people there have a real passion for what they do, be it an ancient craft, or making noodles the way that they were taught for generations, or something as simple as helping you find a pair of jeans you're really gonna love. And it made me think about my favorite kind of food people to talk to, the ones that are just head over heels with what they do. And today, we get to talk to two such people. Later in the show, we'll visit with Nik Sharma, the former scientist turned cookbook author, now living his best life in America's test kitchen. And first, we talk to the wonderful Henrietta Lovell. Founder of the rare tea company, Henrietta started her shop in Britain, but now finds herself supplying teas to the best restaurants in the world, including Noma in Copenhagen and Cezanne in Tokyo. But what sets buying tea from her apart isn't just the delicate flavors, it's the understanding that you're buying from farmers and true craftspeople. And her own craft is in connecting with those folks and understanding their work. So hey, Henrietta, it's so lovely to see you.
Hello, Francis. Lovely to see you and speak to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, same. So I'm excited for this because I grew up around tea. Obviously, my family's Chinese, and I've always wanted to learn more about it. So every time I have a chance to talk to someone who really knows about tea, I get really jazzed. Because tea is so amazing, right? It is the most consumed beverage on earth after water,
yes.
Right? It has like the second longest history of any beverage, going back to like 2700 BC or something crazy. And yet, most Americans, and even as you told me, most Brits, like yourself, really don't know that much about it. So let's start with, how did you get so into tea?
It's a long and winding road, but it's been a fascinating one. I started, like most people, drinking kind of pretty generic, big brand, industrial tea bag, and I thought that's what tea was. And I think that for a lot of people, that's what tea is. And then I had the huge privilege and of adventure to go and work in China, and that was sort of at the end of the last millennium. I'm quite an old lady. It was venerable. It was in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. I got to go to China, and I got to try amazing tea that really blew my mind. And I know we often use that phrase, but it was really mind-altering and world-altering and shattering, because I just thought, this is something I know. I'm very, very familiar with. My culture is sort of made up of English breakfast tea. And then I got a little cup of oolong. And I didn't really know that oolong existed. And I didn't know that tea could be drunk out of a little tiny cup, and it could be brewed from real whole leaves that would rehydrate, a herb that rehydrated into a leaf, and that the flavor profile would be so extraordinarily complex. It started sort of all green and luscious and went into tropical notes of mango and pineapple, and then ended with this lovely dry mineral finish. And I was like, what is this? The tea. And it wasn't because it was flavored or because it had sort of chemicals on it. It was just this beautifully crafted leaf. And I thought, God, I've been missing out on so much. I thought, this is very fascinating. I want to learn more about the history. And I started reading things and finding out that these ancient terroirs that have been around for, as you say, millennia, still existed, and tea was still made in the same way. And at the time, China had been quite closed off for quite a long time. And it just started to open up, and it was possible to go and visit places that were kind of mythological. Imagine if Champagne, for instance, had been something you could read about, but you couldn't go to this region of France.
Sure.
And then suddenly you could, and you found that they were still making this ancient fizzy wine in the same way that they've been making it for hundreds of years. But here you have tea being made in the same way for thousands of years. And it was so exciting to be that person who went and found it, and also how extraordinary I must have seemed to the people who live and work in those remote regions that suddenly turned up. And one of the first times I wanted to take photos, and I thought, I'll look great in a red dress in a green field. I wanted to tell the story about these places. So I thought, I'll put on a red dress. And of course, that's a wedding dress color in China. So they're like, here's a single woman in a red dress. Oh my God, I'm so naive. And yeah, I've learned a lot. I'm still very naive and I'm still learning a lot. So forgive me for any mistakes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the tea itself for a moment, because I think this is one thing that is such a, both a source of intrigue for me, but also seems sort of mysterious. So like you said, a beautiful tea simply steeped in water can have so many different flavors and can evolve through the course of your drinking that same tea, right? It's not just in that one mouthful. It's like the second cup of that same tea or the third sip of that same tea actually can taste different. I once heard that tea has something like physically, chemically has 2,500 flavor compounds.
Yeah.
You know, the natural compounds that create flavor, where wine has a few hundred. So there's this enormous range of flavors that can be had in
It's
tea.
like
But
a
what's so interesting is
cornucopia
it's crazy, but it all comes from the same
plant. Yeah.
Like matcha to a black tea is all from the same plant. So tell us, what are some of the factors that make one tea different from another?
Well, it's such a wide story as well. I mean, I want to say when a chef comes into my tasting room and they see the range, they're like, what? And then we start tasting the range of flavor profiles. It's so vast that people feel like they've just learnt a new color or like got a new palette to play with. It goes, even the pH changes. So wine, of course, is always acidic, but the pH of tea can change from neutral into acid and alkaline. So you've got so much going on, but also, you know, from fruity to nutty to chocolate to malt to citrus, there's almost nothing that you can't find. I can give you a tea that tastes like peaches. A specific tea from a specific region in Cholo, on a farm called Setemwa in Malawi. There's a specific varietal on a specific tea made in a specific way that will taste like peaches and apricots.
That's wild.
And so the factors that alter that flavor are exactly the same with wine. Everything you know about wine, it comes from one plant, grapes. Tea comes from Camellia sinensis. And then all the factors of terroir and varietal. So, you know, there are many varieties of grapes, there are many varieties of tea within the two main branches. And then when you plant it, how you plant it, and the pH of the soil, how the water drains off that field, what the gradient of that field is, how high it is when the sun hits the field in a certain morning, whether there's cloud cover at a certain time of year, what the rainfall is, all those multitude vagaries of that tiny spot of the world will change the flavor profile. And then, of course, you've got the seasons. When do you pick it? How do you pick it? And then, how do you process it? So are you keeping it completely natural as it is and just drying it, making a white tea? Are you roasting it, toasting it, making it a green tea, steaming it in Japan? Are you then crushing it a little bit to start oxidization to make an oolong and controlling that oxidization to make maybe a light oolong into a dark oolong? Or are you crushing it, oxidizing it, and then roasting it in a way to produce a black tea? And then you can go even further and ferment it into a pu'er. So, I mean, take all that knowledge that you've amassed about choosing a wine and what flavor profiles you like, and you'll find that in tea. And that brings me to the really important thing. Is like with a wine, you want to know a bit of a story, don't you? You want to know, not beyond the color, where does it come from? Beyond the country, what region? Beyond the region, what part of that region? Beyond that, what farm, what maker, what craftsman? And when you start hearing the story of amazing craftsmen, you fall more deeply in love and the flavor appreciation improves. And the same is true of tea.
And I love you said this to me the other day, which is, you know, when people talk about wine, you can tell that they think it's valuable because they talk about where it's from and how it's made, and they know all this detail about it. And yet we don't do that with tea, but you could. And we can value tea, and we can value the people who make tea. And maybe let's go here, because I want to ask you about the regions that you source your tea from.
Can I tell you about this one?
Sure. What are you drinking?
This is called cloud tea. We call this cloud tea. This comes from Nayan Liliban. She's a female tea maker, and she actually owns her own land in Meghalaya in India, in the Himalaya. And, you know, I can tell you that this is made by someone who really cares about her community, her land, and the flavour of what she produces. She doesn't want to produce lots of tea. She wants to produce really good tea that will change your mind about how tea in India can be. And it's light. It's got a lovely chocolatey, like dark chocolate, burnt sugary sort of aromas, a little bit of maltiness, and a high florality. And by florality, I don't mean like lots of flowers, but like lots of bright aromas coming off the top.
Oh, beautiful. See, I love that.
It's really something you can fall in love with. I mean, and it floods your life with pleasure. It costs a few cents more to go and find those amazing teas per cup, really just a few cents. And then you get all that from it. Well, if you trade it up in wine, to get the really good stuff, it's a lot of dollars.
This bottle is several hundred, that bottle is several thousand, and but here a few cents, and you can really make a difference. Henrietta Lovell is the founder of Rare Tea Company. More with her in a minute, and then our friend Nik Sharma joins us with tips on how to make your home cooking even better. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the Splendid Table from APM, American Public Media. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table, the show for curious cooks and eaters. We're talking with Henrietta Lovell, tea explorer and founder of Rare Tea Company. Let's get back to it with her. You buy and sell teas mainly, I think, from like 3 different regions, right? That have different styles of tea, and like who've been producing tea and like enjoying tea in their own culture in a different way. Yeah. Teas from China, from Japan, and this is a little bit of a unique situation, but South Asia and East Africa, which is, I believe the tea industry started there really because British brought tea there to be farmed for consumption, in Europe.
The global north,
but tell us about these 3 regions and how they differ from one another in broad brushstrokes for a beginner.
So I started in China where tea began, and it really, as you said, millennia of tradition, and rather like wine, a long cultural appreciation. I mean, emperors were buried with their favorite kind of teas for the afterlife. I mean, and all through history, it's been considered precious, a medicine, something that we would trade up to get the best we could afford. Always, like wine, we might have a cheap wine on a Wednesday night, and then if your mother-in-law is coming round on Sunday, you might buy something a bit better to impress her. You aspire to what you could afford. And there's this huge differential in price range in teas, and depending on how they're crafted, how rare they are, how special, how difficult they are to make. And China's had that for a really long time, and still to this day, a tea farmer thrives and flourishes like a vineyard, because if he's making really great tea, he can get a great value for it. The only real issue is the craftsmanship. It's difficult to keep. People don't want to live in very rural communities and do agricultural work. That's the main problem that tea has. And otherwise, if you make great tea, you're doing really, really well in China. And I think it was the 5th century, the Chinese shared tea with Japan, and Japan also has this very rich culture of tea appreciation. It's changing slightly now. People are drinking matcha lattes, which is so strange.
From the country that created matcha as a ceremonial sort of
precious, meditational, and I spent 5 weeks in China in 25, and I saw a lot of iced tea, which is really strange too, because tea is really supposed to be as a kind of medicine, warm and good for your body, and having it cold is really anathema to ancient tradition. But things move and change, and customs and people change. But we know now, wherever we are in the world, if you want to buy Japanese tea or really good Chinese tea, you pay a lot of money for it. That's not because it's better. That's because there's a market for it, and it's well appreciated, and people understand its value. But if we took tea from Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, where the British took it, they stole the tea bush from China, and they started planting it in places that were their colonial lands, which is, a dreadful, awful story. But and then into East Africa, there isn't an indigenous high value for tea because it was brought in, and the market is really an external market, and we've lost our value for tea, that appreciation, that understanding. So it's an economically very, very different story.
Interesting.
In fact, there are about 15 million people working in tea. in those regions, and most of them are women, and most of them living in poverty.
And this is, I mean, I've definitely noticed on your website, for instance, on Rare Tea Company's website, you're very proud of all the teas that you source from all these different places. But to my mind, when I'm reading the stories of the producers in South Asia and East Africa, like, to me, there feels like a special care there.
I fell in love with tea as a drink, and I thought, I really want everyone to know this beautiful tea that I've fallen in love with, that, we think there's only this one industrial thing and there's all this amazing leaf. So I started Rare Tea back in 2004 for that reason. And then I understood there was a very different economic story to tell, and that there's a lot of exploitation, and I wanted to change that story. And I thought, well, it's possible. Tea has been and is appreciated, and people who work in tea can thrive, more than thrive. And so where it's a exploitative industry that survives on poverty, I thought, God, there's an answer to that. There's a change that can happen. And by selling tea from places like Japan, where there is no economic necessity, I'm not doing anyone a favor by buying matcha. I'm just lucky to have those relationships. But by putting it right beside a tea from Malawi in East Africa or Nepal and saying that, look, taste these. They're the same quality. They taste different, but they're the same quality. They could exist on the menu at Noma or Cezanne in Tokyo. They're appreciated by chefs and restaurateurs around the world who really, I think we respect their palates more than you can just hear me saying it. I think then we can say, look, this really does have value, and it's just really about changing our perception. So putting a Malawi peony beside a Chinese white peony and saying, look, these are just as good as one another. That's very exciting, isn't it? And I think it helps people understand. And I do feel that those impact teas, where people paying more and understanding and falling in love with teas from Malawi, where they have more of an impact on a community, I feel more excited, and that's why I get up in bed in the morning.
No, I love that. I think that's amazing. So, okay, so help us, right? If we are rookie tea drinkers, or if all we know of tea is iced tea or whatever, we have like a small, tea has a small place in our life, but we're interested and we want to maybe learn more, maybe see what's out there and see what we like and what we might gravitate towards. How would you suggest a person start?
The very most important thing is, I think, find someone who buys the tea from a tea farmer, from a tea community, from people who make tea, because then they're going to get the value of the tea, and also they're not just buying a commodity product, they're buying a crafted, beautiful thing from a farmer. And I think that's always going to taste better. I think I went to a MAD symposium in Copenhagen, the food symposium, and I heard Farron Adria say that once. If you want amazing flavor, find amazing farmers. And I've over the last 20-something years, I've found that to be true. So find a direct trade tea company, and then start with the tea that you're familiar with. So, like for instance, I have I sell black iced teas, but I can tell you the name of the farm where it comes from, and it's a beautiful version of a loose leaf iced tea. And I think if you try that, something you're familiar with, and you say, oh, now hold on a second, that tastes a lot better than the industrial one, which has no terroir, no connection with a farmer or a place or even a country, which is probably not helping that farming community and isn't made with love and care. And if that tastes better, then you could start exploring, okay, well, I trust these people. Let me try maybe a black tea that I'm going to have hot. And a good tea company hopefully will tell you the flavor profiles. And be like, oh, no, I really like dark chocolate, or I'm more of a caramel, or I like more fruity, or you go maybe into the greens. And it's interesting because green tea is not something that's very common in the US at the moment. And I've been selling tea in the US for, I think, about 18 years. It's my largest market. And I've seen the changes, and the shift has gone into green tea, but mostly into matcha. And there's such a world of green tea in the middle. It's like white wine, There's so much flavor variation. And people, when they try it, they really like it. But they've had this one industrial experience. They've had this cheap bag. And it wasn't crafted with love. It was just crafted for price and volume. And it was bitter and dry, and it made their mouth pucker like a cat's bottom. And they were like, no, it's not for me. I don't like green tea. So I think find a tea company that you feel confidence in, and then try little bits of flavors that you may not think you like. But honestly, a really good tea, you don't have to be a sommelier or a fancy chef to get it. If it's really good, it's just really good. I did have experience to explain this. A red top newspaper, like a tabloid newspaper in the UK, once accused me of selling fancy packaging. They said, tea's tea, you're a charlatan. And so I took the journalist from that newspaper very naively. I took them to one of my favorite customers, who was a tattoo artist in a very dodgy part of London. And it wasn't the kind of place where you get a little swallow on your wrist. It was a place where you get like a full face tattoo, or or a full arm or leg. I mean, there were all the characters, all the other tattoo artists. I mean, the guy he's sadly now no longer with us, but he's called Zed Lahed. They call him the Dot Father. He was his studio, a very famous tattoo guy, and he had a full face tattoo, and all his guys did. And then the customers were also quite heavily tattooed, and it looked like a place that a nice young lady might not feel comfortable in. But
Sure.
I knew Zed very well over years. He loved his tea. He liked jasmine, silvertip, and oolong, and so the journalist came in with a photographer, and they were all talking about how much they love tea, and I did an experiment with a big brand tea bag against a loose leaf English breakfast that I'd blended myself. And we gave it to everybody, including the journalist and the photographer, and every single person liked the good one that I'd made against the other. So it doesn't mean that you have to be, have a fancy palate.
Sure.
Or maybe it says something about me where I've just said that people who have heavy face tattoos wouldn't have a good palate, which is ridiculous as well. They're the most
I just
charming.
like the range of friends you have. Yeah.
Yeah, tea takes you to so many amazing places, from duchesses, and I made tea for our late Queen Elizabeth many times, and tea cocktails, to Zed Lahed's studio.
Oh my God. Oh, Henrietta, I love your life, and I loved talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming by.
That's it. Have I been wittering on for that long?
No.
I didn't let you have a word in edgeways, Francis. You sure there aren't?
No, it's a great day at work when I don't have to do anything.
Oh my God, I have so many things I want to say. I'm so sorry. But thank you so much for giving me a voice to be able to say those things, because I really believe that once people know that there are communities behind the teas that they enjoy, and that they can help those communities thrive, that increases their enjoyment, but also they know that there's something small they can do, that we can all do, to make the world a little bit better. I think especially now, when we feel like the world is a little, sometimes I feel like I'm in a parallel universe where I've gone into the upside down or something. Everything seems so strange, and everything's changing so fast, and we can feel very powerless. And there are still these things we can do. We can support amazing farmers in East Africa or Nepal, and we can also at the same time flood our lives with pleasure. So it's kind of a very happy story.
I love that. Well, thank you, Henrietta.
It was a pure joy. Thank you so much, Francis.
Henrietta Lovell is the founder of the Rare Tea Company. You can find her teas at rareteacompany.com. And she left us with a recipe for her cold brew iced tea, which she serves in wine glasses, by the way. It's at splendidtable.org. Nik Sharma is always a blast to talk to. The former molecular biologist turned food photographer and James Beard Award-nominated cookbook author has such a great way of getting people excited to cook. His passion is so infectious, whether he's demystifying the scientific process of cooking or sharing the dynamite flavors of his native India, or both. He's recently joined the fabulous nerds at America's Test Kitchen as an editor-in-residence and stars in a new video series for them called Flavor Forward. Hey Nick, it's great to see you.
Hi Francis, it's so good to see you too.
And I have to say, it's been a little while, but congratulations on your new-ish gig. You are an editor-in-residence in America's Test Kitchen. That's such a funny title. It's like, do you live here now? I don't know. But I don't know. You're a scientist. You love this. Maybe you do live in the test kitchen.
Oh gosh, I love being in the test kitchen. It's a dream come true because literally everyone is a science nerd in there.
Yeah. Well, I love that they're science nerds because they're like cooks first, but you're a scientist and then you're a food nerd after that. So I think it does sound like a perfect match. Um, and I love your new video series with them. It's called Flavor Forward. The food looks fantastic, but I really love how when you're watching the videos, you pepper all these cooking demonstrations with these like cool tricks and explain the science of why they work. So I want to spend some time talking with you about some of these videos and some of the recipes and really some of the sort of the magic tricks in them. I know science is not magic. The whole point of science is that it's not magic, but I can't help but say it anyway because it feels like magic sometimes. But let's start with your tandoori salmon. First, actually describe this dish for us. Get us a little excited about it.
So this was one of the first dishes I developed at ATK,
Oh, cool.
and it sounds really simple, when developing a recipe. And I think one of the things with most recipes that are the simplest, they're the hardest to actually develop and get the results. Kind of like cacio e pepe, it's an easy thing to put together on paper, but when you're making it, you run into all these issues. So tandoori salmon was one of those dishes where I said, you know what, I want to make a tandoori dish for you guys, but how do I get the flavors right? And then I'm also using fish, which is not something that's traditionally used even in India with salmon. I mean, salmon's not a traditional Indian fish to begin with. So,
Sure.
and then you've got like me bringing fish to the tandoor. So there were all these complications from the fish being tender, so the proteins kind of denature really fast. How you can bind the flavor in without getting the fish dry. And a tandoor, on the other hand, is this really high heat temperature oven where temperatures go up to 900 degrees.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do we do all this in the test kitchen? And obviously, I'm not going to expect people to go buy a tandoor oven to make this dish, right?
Step
So
one,
how
go
do we
buy
do
yourself
this?
a tandoor.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of one of those aspirational things, but it's not practical.
Sure, sure.
So developing this recipe actually turned out to be one of the most fun things I've done in a while. And it started with the fish. I wanted to use salmon because A, it's a popular fish, and also it has fat, so it keeps the fish juicier during cooking. And then how do we get the broiling temperature right? I mean, sorry, how do we get I'm giving this away too fast, but how do we recreate the tandoor in the house with an oven, because that's what most people will have. And so we figured out broiling is probably the best way to achieve that char. But then with broiling and a protein like fish, because the proteins are so delicate, they squeeze out moisture really fast during cooking, and that makes the fish rubbery. So how do you avoid that? And we came up with this idea of brining the fish because brining is used a lot in cooking. And I started with salt. I put fish in salt solutions. I put fish in baking soda solutions because baking soda is another popular brine that's used commercially
Interesting.
with a lot of meat manufacturers. And then the other thing I did was let's just try a double combo of both salt and baking soda and see how that works.
Okay, so the baking soda thing is, I think, probably going to be new for most home cooks, like brining and salt. That makes a lot of sense for us, right? But the baking soda thing is really interesting. Um, so I know adding baking soda to the marinade is sometimes a restaurant trick for beef.
Yeah.
I personally don't really love it. I feel like I can always tell. Sometimes the beef is like, it's tender, but it's like too tender. It's like
Yeah.
unnaturally tender. And I also often feel like when I taste it, it makes it like the beef is less flavorful for some reason. Maybe I'm making that up, but talk to me about A, what brining in baking soda does, and B, how do you avoid it? Could it be the same problem if you're brining salmon in baking soda? Could it get too tender and does it disrupt the flavor?
Yeah, those are really good questions. And I think, like, for me, baking soda, I notice it in cookie doughs.
Yeah, I hate
Whenever
that
people
flavor.
put too much baking soda, it feels like this weird metal
Yeah,
taste.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel it's very unpleasant. So one of the things I know people do with baking soda is shrimp. When you want, because shrimp is another seafood protein that is really sensitive. If you cook it too fast or too long, it gets rubbery and chewy, and no one likes
Sure.
that. Even the smells go off. And so, knowing that, I said, why don't we just use this for fish and just see how it works? And so, we put the baking soda, made a solution of baking soda. I kept salmon fillets directly in it for about 15 minutes at room temperature, left it in there, and then took it out. And it was noticeable. The difference in texture was really noticeable. And so I compared it with salt. And here's what's so interesting. So whenever you have a protein, think of it like a wet towel.
Okay.
When you squeeze that wet towel really tightly, a lot of that liquid comes out.
Yeah.
So that's how proteins are in meat. You've got these structures that when you twist them and they start to get twisted even more because they're denaturing and changing their physical shape during cooking, all that liquid that's inside is released because it's like a towel that's just dripping all that liquid out.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing that we want to avoid with the salmon. And so to do that, the baking soda, what it does, it has sodium in it because it's a salt of sodium carbonic acid. And the sodium adds electric charges to the amino acids on the proteins. And because they're all the same electric charges, like charges repel each other. And so what's happening in this
Like a magnet,
situation...
when you like the two ends of a magnet, when they
yeah.
like force each other apart.
Exactly, it's the
Okay.
same thing, yeah. And so you've got the same electric charges all over the surface now of the protein after it's been exposed to the brining solution, and they start to repel each other. So they can't come back and contract as much.
Oh, that's so
And so
interesting.
that
Okay.
holds the water. It creates these pockets of space that hold water better. So when you're cooking, you don't run through that problem. The second
So it
thing
doesn't
coming
dry out.
to...
Yeah.
And so the the broiling temperature is quite high. I'm trying to build that char that of the tandoor in the fish. This is protecting against it. And then to counteract the flavor problem that you were talking about, I actually ended up rinsing the fish, which I was a little nervous about, but it actually works. So what's happening is, in this particular dish, I'm also using beet juice to replicate the red color that a lot of tandoori dishes have. And
Yeah.
beet
Instead of
juice...
food coloring. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we were doing the tests, it turns out that beet juice turns a very ugly grayish color with alkaline conditions, and baking soda is an alkali. So it has a higher pH. And so I was losing all this beet juice that I grated and squeezed out, and the color was gone. It was turning gray. It tasted great, but it just didn't look like a tandoori dish.
Okay.
So not only did I have to rinse the fish to get rid of that surface baking soda that was present, I also had to then go back and add lemon juice to neutralize it because that just wasn't enough.
Yeah. Okay, this
And
is
so
where
I
the
knew...
scientist in you works, right? Because the baking soda is a base, right? And like we know, bases and acids neutralize each other. So that's so smart. They're like, oh, if that's doing a thing to the beet juice, then you add a little lemon juice, a little acid, and basically like makes it disappear.
Yeah, it was an easy fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an easy fix. Just brush it off, and then you put the marinade back on. You put the marinade and then stick it into the oven, and that's it. And you still have the juiciness because the proteins have changed enough. There's no baking soda now, no high pH on the surface of the fish.
Yeah, and you've gotten rid of that baking soda
And you got the red
taste.
color, yeah. And so it works out really well.
And so the brine is just literally baking soda, salt, and water.
It's just baking soda and water.
Just baking, no salt even. Okay.
So I did test salt, and when I tested salt, it just squeezed all the water out. It just wasn't effective. And then when I did baking soda with salt in water, it did the same thing. So the effect of the salt was quite demonstrable.
So just baking soda, water, a
Just
short
baking soda and
15-minute brine, rinse it off afterwards, pat it dry, and maybe even just like a little lemon juice to kind of neutralize what's on the surface, get rid of the flavor. So cool. See, I love this. This is like an incredible nerdistry. I love it. And then in your particular recipe for this, you put on this beautiful spice paste, and then you just throw it in the broiler. So a tandoor is a super intense hot oven. Heat comes from the bottom, and usually like things cooked in the tandoor are either, it's like if it's bread like naan, it's slapped to the side of the wall, right?
Yeah.
Or usually you have to use long, basically like skewers.
Yeah. And so, like you said, like the tandoor is so hot, it's also heat's coming from the bottom, but it's also being reflected from the sides of the oven.
Yeah.
And traditionally, they're made of clay. The more modern ones you see in restaurants will use stainless steel. So there's a lot of heat that's going back and forth, which creates this amplified effect. So things cook fast. They burn. A part of that burning is the flavor that tandoor is known for. Even with naan, you want that burn on the
There's a
bread,
little
on the
char,
back.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I had to recreate that. And so broiling was the easiest way to do it at a much lower temperature. But you just move it slightly closer to the heating element on top. So I think on average, I use usually between 6 to 8 inches from the top broiling element. And it works really well.
Nik Sharma is editor-in-residence at America's Test Kitchen and is author of Veg Table. We'll be back with more with him in just a minute. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the Splendid Table from American Public Media. I'm Francis Lamb, and you're listening to The Splendid Table. We're talking with Nik Sharma at America's Test Kitchen. Let's get back to it with him. Let's jump to another dish. You have this really cool one. It's a one-pan dish, rather. Lemon braised chicken with pearl couscous. So already I'm like psyched for this because it's like chicken, with lemon 3 ways. You have zest, juice, and preserved lemon. Already sounds delicious. But I want to start with the marinade step again, actually, because here's another like magical texture question. You start the video with a comment about how lemon juice in a marinade can tenderize meat. But if you go too far, it can ruin the texture. So talk to us about that and why it works and why it can ruin the texture. Like, why do you have to be careful doing it?
Yeah, so in cooking, we use a lot of cooking acids, but the 3 primary ones are vinegar, which is acetic acid.
Sure.
The second one is citric acid, which is lemon juice, which is present in lemon juice. And the third one is lactic acid.
So
What's interesting is that the
yogurt.
last...
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the last 2 acids, lactic acid and citric acids, are the only ones that are synthesized by cells, by animal cells. Vinegar is something that is synthesized during fermentation by bacteria or yeast. And so it's not something that animal tissue is exposed to on a normal basis. If you do see acetate, which is vinegar, in in an animal in the blood, it's indicating some kind of malfunction, that the animal is sick.
Okay.
And so the tissue is not used to it, right? And so that was my logic behind this, is that, one of the things when people talk about cooking acids and marinating them too long, there's always this general statement that's thrown that don't marinate it too long because the surface of the meat will start to get crumbly because it's denaturing on the surface, and you get this unpleasant texture on the meat. But it turns out it's not true. And vinegar is the one where you see this effect.
I see.
Predominantly, just because animal tissue has not evolved to deal with acetic acid, which is vinegar.
Okay.
Citric acid is synthesized by animals, but it is present inside the mitochondria and it rarely gets out. When it does, animal tissues can handle it.
Okay.
Lactic acid is something that you see in the blood, especially, if you have muscles, it's produced in the muscles predominantly, and you see it in the blood. So again, that's another acid. So these 2 acids, they're a little more gentle on meat. And so I use that logic to develop the marinade. So I'm using citric acid. You can keep it for a few, you don't even actually have to marinate the chicken. It's pretty flavorful on its own. So you can just mix everything.
It as like a seasoning.
Yeah, and then just like slap it onto the grill or whatever you're cooking it in a skillet or a pan, and it'll be fine. But if you want more flavor from the aromatics that are present in the marinade, leave it overnight, and you will get better permeation of those flavors. And the other thing that I did was, this chicken has skin on, and I love chicken with skin on because the fat also adds like this extra layer of juiciness. It protects the meat from getting denatured too far along in these kind of dishes.
Yeah. So, okay, you marinate in this like lemon. I mean, there's a lot of different ingredients in the marinade, but basically lemon is doing the tenderizing work that you're talking about, and lemon can be absorbed by the meat, which is cool. And you sear the chicken. You do that thing where you sear the chicken, obviously, it gets nice and brown. You take it out, and then you cook pearl couscous in the pan. Pearl couscous is basically like a pasta, right? It's almost like
it's
pasta
extruded.
balls.
Yeah.
And then you put the chicken on top. So people love a one-pan dish.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you, I get so nervous cooking rice or couscous, like this pasta with like the meat on top, because I'm like maniacal about like not overcooking the rice. Like I hate overcooked rice. I hate overcooked pasta so much. So I get so nervous, like this idea of like, and then you put it all together and you cook it together. Like, how are you so confident? How do I get the confidence?
So one thing about working at ATK now for over a year is that they're very stringent on everything, including the type of pan you use. So when we were making the video, I remember I couldn't switch to another pan because it literally does change cooking times, like you mentioned. the dark. So if you use a cast iron skillet and the recipe is tested with that, just stick to it.
Okay.
Because if you think about even your cooking dishes, cast iron is, first of all, it's an alloy of iron, right? So you've got metal in there, and it's a dark metal, so it absorbs heat faster. It also retains heat quite differently from, say, a clear stainless steel pan. So you need to start thinking about these things. So the cooking time changes because of the amount of heat that's being retained, amount of heat absorbed. And I think that's where a lot of these like one pan cooking dishes, the timings start to change, and overcooking or undercooking, because you've just essentially changed the main thing that's holding it all together. And so the amount of heat and cooking time begins to change.
Okay, so the answer to why you're so confident is because I did this 25 times. Just follow the recipe.
Yeah, just follow the recipe, stick to, yeah.
Okay, so my nervousness around like finished cooking on top of the rice is still founded. There's no magic trick to get around that.
Also, another good thing about this recipe, coming back to a little bit of the physics, there's a lot of water in this pan because we're cooking the couscous, so there's moisture from there. We've also got the chicken thighs that we're adding back along with any juices from the pan. That came off with the chicken, we're adding it back to the pan, and you're covering it. A good thing about couscous and the chicken, because it's sealed with the lid, water never goes above a certain temp. It never goes above the boiling point. So the risk of it drying out is also really low.
Okay. Yeah, so you're partially steaming it too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me get to one more dish. Because this is like just such a simple one. It's funny because we've talked about like these like really like really thoughtful marinating techniques and brining techniques, and you have a video that's like, crack open a can of beans. It's gonna be really good. So this is actually very simple, very like home cook friendly. You have a Calabrian Chile stewed white beans with almond romesco, and I think the romesco is really, to me, the star of this dish. I think romesco is a super under-heralded sauce, condiment. I don't know, what would you call it? It's kind of like a dip, a sauce, a condiment. In this case, you're using it as a flavor base. Talk to us about romesco.
Okay, I love condiments. I think in my refrigerator, I will probably have no food cooked, but I'll have condiments. And so
Yeah.
romesco is one of those things where you can pull it out and you can use it in a million different ways. And also, it's another condiment that you can make in a million different ways. I'm using almonds in there just to give it body and a little bit of texture. And I roast the peppers and the tomatoes and the shallots and the onions in this dish just to build the body of that sauce. So you have that caramelization, the Maillard taking place in there. So you build the body of the sauce. And then I'm using it to reframe the narrative on canned beans. I do like canned beans. It's not that I hate them, but I also like them. They're kind of bland, to be honest, right? Like beans, if you taste them, they've got that buttery texture if they're cooked well. But then beyond that, there's really nothing. And so it needs that lift. And the romesco is what does that for me. So it was just such a fun thing to do. And what I love about this dish is that you can make the romesco ahead of time, keep it in. When you're ready, just pull it all together and toss it, and it's done.
Yeah.
It's just such a fun dish.
Yeah. So the romesco, like you said, like there's red peppers, there's tomatoes. You char them in the broiler. Once again, the broiler is the secret hero of your kitchen.
Yeah.
And then you just and you make it almost like a food processor pesto, right? You put those vegetables into a food processor, almonds. You put Parmesan cheese in yours, which is not traditional, but I mean, who's gonna
I love
be
cheese.
mad about that? It's delicious. And then you kind of like just blitz it all together with some olive oil, and it's a super flavorful. Like you said, it could be a dip, it could be a condiment. In this case, you crack open a can of beans and some vegetable stock, and you just stir a bunch of it in, and it becomes sort of its own broth. I do have one science question that you sort of bring up in this recipe also. Oh, garlic. There's garlic in the romesco, right?
Yeah.
And even though you're putting it all in a food processor, you make a point of chopping the garlic before putting in the food processor because the flavor is different. Why?
So this is a really interesting question. It's a simple thing that makes a huge difference. When testing the recipe, I first started, because I'm a lazy cook, I love throwing everything into the
You sound
blender.
like
The
it.
food. Yeah, I love it because you just throw everything in a blender and then you get the smooth thing and call it a day, right? But when I first tested with garlic, I threw full garlic cloves in there and I said, oh, it's getting mellowed. What can we do without increasing the amount of garlic, but get that garlic kick to it? Because the Calabrian chilies are pretty strong in that dish. Calabrian chilies are another fermented ingredient in that needs something to stand against. And garlic is the flavor from garlic comes from the cells. There's an enzyme in there called allanase, which breaks down when garlic is cut. It's also present in onions. When you cut them, the cells are broken. This enzyme comes out and it reacts with chemicals that are present inside the garlic, which creates these aromatic sulfur compounds. So it was such a simple fix. If I chop the garlic, it's going to have more cells broken, which means more enzyme is released. And that enzyme has time to produce those sulfur compounds that I want, those flavor compounds. If I put it into a food processor directly, the pH of what's all of those things in there is going to denature the enzyme, because enzymes are proteins, so that allanase doesn't really get a chance to do its thing. So you don't get those flavor molecules.
Yeah.
So just chopping it beforehand and then putting it into the blender, I'll get the extra flavor, that extra texture I'm looking out for. And then even the recipe has olive oil. And so the olive oil, a lot of those sulfur compounds they get dissolved in the olive oil because they're fat soluble, and it holds on to it. And it was such a simple thing that made a huge difference in the flavor of this romesco.
Okay, this is awesome, because I've wondered this for so long, and you just explained this very simple way, which is basically the garlic. A clove of garlic contains the elements that create garlic flavor, right? But the garlic itself, like that flavor doesn't. It kind of doesn't exist yet, right?
It doesn't exist yet.
You have to cut the garlic so that those components combine to create garlic flavor. And if you throw it in a food processor and you whir it all up, it's basically shearing the garlic, but immediately dispersing everything, and the enzyme is being eliminated by the acids or whatever. So it doesn't actually create the garlic flavor. So you chop it first to create garlic flavor, then add it in.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just not giving it a chance. And we do this. We actually do this. The opposite of it with pickled onions. And even when people chop onions and you don't want that bite, we tell people soak it in cold water just to get rid of. It's the same thing. You're basically denaturing or deactivating that enzyme or diluting it away from doing anything. And it's such a simple fix. Maybe like a few seconds? It's worth it.
Yeah, but just like knowing that knowledge, it's like, that like totally can change the way you approach. And that's why it's funny because people think of Italian food as being a very garlicky cuisine, but then if you watch Italian chefs cook, oftentimes they treat the garlic very gently. Like you might lightly crush the garlic clove or not crush it at all and just put it in a pan of oil, and then they take the garlic clove out and they don't even serve the garlic, right? And it's like, that's a way to add garlic but minimize the garlic, versus what you're showing us, chop it up first, and that's a way to maximize the garlic. It's so amazing. So cool. So interesting.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, like in different cuisines, it's really interesting just to see how chefs and cooks control flavor development.
Yeah.
Even a mortar and pestle, you crush garlic in a mortar and pestle. If it's made of marble, your mortar and pestle, marble is calcium carbonate. That's going to neutralize some of those flavors also, because a lot of that is acidic.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Oh God, you are in the right place, man. I can't believe you spend all day in the lab just tinkering, learning this stuff. Well, Nik, this has been such a blast. Thank you so much.
It's always fun to be on the Splendid table with you, Francis. Thank you for having me.
Nik Sharma is an editor-in-residence at America's Test Kitchen and hosts their video series, Flavor Forward. He's also the author of Veg Table, The Flavor Equation, and A Brown Table. He shared his recipes for Tandoori Salmon, Calabrian Chile White Beans with Almond Romesco, and Lemon Braised Chicken with Couscous. Find a link to them at splendidtable.org. Well, that is our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again next week. Be sure to check out our free and amazing newsletter called Weeknight Kitchen. We share a new recipe every week from the best and brightest food writers working today. And when you sign up, one lucky person a month wins a copy of a brand new cookbook from this season's crop. Go to splendidtable.org/giveaway. Subscribe to our podcast, and we have a lot happening on our YouTube channel. Head over there to see some of the video behind our audio, including extended interviews with guests, videos from our live shows, and more. The Splendid Table was created by Sally Swift and Lynn Rosado Casper and was made this week by technical producer Jennifer Lukey, producers Eric Romero and Maria Wortel, and managing producer Sally Swift. Jordan Turgeon is our digital producer, our intern is Ruby Sigmund, and Lauren Humpert is our senior podcast production manager. Thank you for listening. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is APM, American Public Media.